All right, welcome everybody. We're just going to wait a few minutes here and let some more folks trickle in here. Appreciate you all joining today. For those of you that have joined, if you want to look in the chat window, I've pinned a survey 123 up there. We appreciate anybody can just click on that, do the link. We're not going to reach out and spam you or anything. We're building dashboards, really trying to hone in on where folks are calling in from. If anybody attended the GISA conference down the Gulf Shores, I believe we demoed that dashboard down there. So we've got uh, obviously most of our callers are coming in from Alabama, but apparently we're trending in Mexico City. Like to see who's calling in from where. So if you don't mind, just click on that survey and fill it out for us, and we'll get started here in just about 2 minutes. All right, Ashley and Tony, if you guys are ready, you guys can go ahead and jump into it. And anyone from the GISA team, if you don't mind, if we have people coming in, just please admit them. I'm going to kick this off. We really appreciate Bonfire Engineering being here with us today. Bonfire is one of our corporate sponsors for GISAA. Bonfire specializes in broadband planning services, engineering, construction, and fiber operations. I had the pleasure of working with both Tony and Ashley in my past life at 3GIS. Tony is the OSP engineering and GIS manager for Bonfire, and Tony's got a long history of working in the telecom industry. Prior to he and I working together for a better part of a decade at 3GIS, where he served as OSP engineering manager. Tony had a background in construction and design for AT&T, And then Ashley is a senior analyst who also worked with us at 3GIS as OSP design lead and is now one of the leads there at Bonfire. Today they're going to give us a really cool lunch and learn about how they're using GIS to design, implement, build, construct fiber optic networks. If you would, let's hold all questions. Just throw them up in chat, and when we get through with the presentation, we'll read through those questions and we'll do our best, time permitted, to answer those. With that, Ashley and Tony, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, Josh. Ashley?
Hey everyone. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Right. Do you see it, boss?
Yes, we got you.
All right, cool. Then, all right, so then we're gonna go ahead and jump into it. Fair warning, this is a pretty exciting topic for me, so I'm gonna speak probably faster than I'd like, but I'll try to slow it down. Today we're gonna talk about, like, the title is Unlocking the Power of GIS, right? It sounds pretty cool, and it is really cool. But we're going to start off with talking about some challenges that we've noticed. This is primarily in the telecom field, but it is not just telecom that deals with these challenges. It's, implementing GIS in other utilities or in other lines of business, right? And then we're going to discuss, like, the steps that we took to minimize these challenges, to minimize these, like, pain points for us, and what that's looked like primarily in our industry. But some of this stuff, once again, it can be for a variety of different implementations. So, like I said, so the first part is the challenges, which is, I'm sure, fun for all of us to discuss. First off is data silos. And I'm sure this is not just telecom, right? This is across the board. We've seen this, where the flow of information gets stifled, right? Or it becomes this, like, once our information, our data gets spread out, and it's not just in one system, it's in many systems. And when this happens, a lot of times, not only do you have data silos within, like, your systems, but a lot of times I've noticed that you got a person that's your data silo, right? There's been a lot of projects we worked on where you can't even find the information you need without consulting this person. So you're, like, kind of dead in the water on your projects or with them on anything, because you need to get with this one person so they can tell you where the data is, what's happening, is that data even accurate? So data silos are just, like, they just bog you down, right? They put roadblocks in your way again and again, whether it's systems, people, whatever the case. They're not good, right? We want to try to minimize data silos as much as possible. Another issue we've seen a lot is this partial implementation of GIS solutions. This is really big for a lot of small telecom industries, small upcoming telecom companies, and not just telecom, right? I've seen this in a lot of other just starting out with GIS, right? Maybe they've gone to some of the really cool conferences and they've been wowed by demos, and they're like, oh, this is good. This will get me what I need. This is great. And so then they get sold on this solution without really understanding what it takes to implement a GIS, that, do your current processes work with a GIS solution? How will you have to change how you collect data, how you provide data to the system, how you display data? So a lot of the times, this partial implementation of GIS, it happens fast, right? You're like, okay, I want that solution. And they just run right out of the gates. They're like, okay, we're going to implement it. We got it. We got you. We'll get you the data. And then at the end of the line, you're like, did this solve anything? Or, like, are my people just really frustrated with this new system and they don't understand, what's happening, what they need to do, what do we need to do to get to this point A? Like, I don't understand why I can't be exactly like the demo, right? So it becomes, like, really frustrating, and then it gives a lot of people a bad taste in their mouth for GIS, because they're like, I tried it and it didn't work. It wasn't like the demo, So it does take time, right, to really understand your GIS solution and how it's going to impact not just the department, like one single department, but the business in totality. Like everyone needs to understand how the GIS solution can help them, right? Get everyone on board. Another thing we have a lot is, and this is maybe, I'm not sure about other industries, but this is big in telecom, where we're doing engineering projects and we're not really delivering work ready for asset managers, right? And at least in a lot of telecom stuff, we've gotten away with working in CAD, doing DWGs, marking up red lines in the field, and then that's it, But a lot of times you might get those red lines back, and you're like, okay, well, nothing's changed, so nothing happened out there. Good news, I'll just draw a straight line, and that's it, right? It's not really an accurate presentation of what's out in the field. And as counties and cities and other people are adopting GIS solutions, you can no longer provide them like a straight line on a piece of paper as built and be like, yeah, this is where it's at, right? People expect GIS data of some sort, not just for like your own stuff, but other people, like when you put permits out there, sometimes a lot of the requirements are, okay, I want to see where the utility data is that belongs to other people on this drawing, right? And if you don't have that, that work, you don't know how to get it, you can't provide it. I mean, that puts you in a tough spot, right? And you kind of lose track of what you're doing and what the GIS stuff is, right? And it's been a real challenge to understand that it is changing, right? And that we can no longer provide and do the status quo, and that we need to move with the times and understand these GIS solutions and understand how we're going to collect that data, provide that data when it's needed, right? And not just react to it, but be proactive, right? With the delivering of work that's ready for an asset management system or that's ready to provide to the stakeholders. And so this last one, this is really like how I feel for like telecom, is that we're kind of latecomers to the GIS scene, kind of how I was talking about earlier. We've gone away with it for a long time, right? It's not to say like, we've had asset managements, they just haven't been as robust as the GIS system can provide, right? So we don't, a lot of telecom, we don't understand what that means. What do we need to, how does our workflow change? And a lot of people don't like change. This line of work, right? And being latecomers to the GIS scene, there's like this disconnect between GIS workers and actual telecom engineering, old-fashioned telecom engineering and GIS workers. There's like a miscommunication. We don't often talk the same language, and that leads to like partial implementation of GIS solutions because telecom's thinking they're going to get exactly what they need, where the GIS people are like, I don't understand why you didn't get to the endpoint the correct way. You just have this miscommunication. And in the end, it just leads to more data silos because you're like, I'm going to try this system. I'm going to try this system. Some of this stuff will just leave as paper CADs, right? And so then suddenly you're everything's piling up, right? So this latecomers to the GIS scene, it has really affected a lot of companies I've seen. And it's hard to get around that, right? So the good news is that there is a light under the tunnel. We just have to really work for it, right? We're at that part where you gotta want it, and you need to be able to explain exactly how GIS is going to help in the future, especially like once again for those telecom companies. So let's start talking. Let's not be doom and gloom this whole lunch and learn. We're going to take some time to kind of go over the solutions that we've implemented in our own company, that we've implemented in other companies that we've seen have been really successful. And the first thing that we always do is we create a standardized schema. And this just gets everyone on the same language. It gets everyone on the same page. We're speaking the same language because otherwise we're just going to keep having that disconnect. And this standardized schema, this might be harder than you think it is, right? And I don't know, especially you'd be surprised between engineers, right? Especially if the engineers, and this is very rare, right? Where engineers come up in the same company and they stay there, right? They're usually coming from other companies, other parts of the United States, maybe even internationally. Trying to get everyone to talk about like what they call things is it's kind of funny, but it could be frustrating as well because they fight among themselves. Like, what do we call this? And they're like, no, I've never called that in the 20 years I've been working. So it can be frustrating, but you can see how necessary it is because even when they're engineering in their own work, they're not calling things the same thing. So you're actually not only helping your GIS system, you're helping them as well. Be like, okay, well, this is what we're going to call it. All right, guys, let's get the whole company on the same page. Let's talk the same language. And once you have the standardized schema, you can implement it into an SDE, which is what we've chosen to do. Of course, with ArcGIS Online and all this kind of stuff, there's other ways to implement this. The biggest thing is that your information is housed in one database. And it's the information you need. And once again, this is not just for telecom, but for all utilities, right? From planning to final as-builts, right? We're going to remove the segmented work. We're going to get rid of the data silos, and we're going to have that single source of truth where we're all talking the same language. And this really ensures, that the GIS people, that we have that rich geospatial data that we need, and that everybody is talking amongst themselves, and they understand, they have that work transparency, and it increases the collaboration. It's really cool to be on a call and share that same map and have the engineers start talking amongst themselves. They're like, oh, why did you engineer it this way? Do you think maybe we could have saved, more cost effective to go across the roundabout, which is not true. But, there's like all these other things that, you're not only just making your GIS system and your reports better, but you're increasing that collaboration between your engineers or, the other specialized fields that GIS helps with, right? And then another thing we did, this is fun. This is one of my favorite things we've implemented. And let me see if I get this video to play. Now, these attribute rules, these are really just in ArcGIS Pro, but these would be the equivalency to database triggers and ArcMap, that kind of stuff, right? And what's so great about these is that it allows us to streamline processes for the engineers or for work, data entry, gets rid of that, right? The mundane data entry. We're able to kind of supplement it, right? And make things a little bit easier, not only for us, because a lot of times if they're new to GIS, people are like, wow, that's a lot of fields. I got to put all that data in. I don't understand why I got to do that. Especially if they're coming from CAD. They're like, that's just a separate layer. Well, it's like, no, not in this case. It's a feature class and you have to put all these fields in. And they're like, oh, that's a lot of work. So the great thing about these attribute rules is that you're able to allow them to trigger upon events. And you can kind of see in this video that basically we have work action codes that describe like materials or construction methods, those kinds of things. So really all they need to do here is they put in the code and it fills in all the other GIS information that we need for, everything. And then in this case here, you're able to do quick calculations for the we have from and to sequentials for cables. So we're inputting that data and then it fills in their sequential length automatically, right? This is also true. We have like relationships between slack loops and fiber cables, which you can create rules around those relationships. And then also, if they're related, then we can add the slack length to the fiber cable length, right? At the end of the day, it's just about work, designing the triggers to work along the process of engineering and, making things feel a little bit easier, making sure we get our GIS data, they get all of the engineering data they could possibly want, without the mundane task of copy paste or data entry or those kinds of things. Another great thing about attribute rules is that you can implement constraints, which is really cool because you can do things like, okay, this conduit is a certain size and I can't put too many cables through it, right? Because there's a size constraint. And you can reflect that within an attribute rule. If they try to relate too many cables to a conduit, you can have an error pop up and basically be like, no, we can't do that. That's not going to work out. So that's the great thing about these attribute rules is that, once again, they're designed to work along the engineer's workflows and help, supplement data for data integrity and accuracy. All right, so that's kind of how we set up, that's a really, really high level of how you set up the GIS system for success. There's like a whole bunch of things, right? The SDE, the schema, the attribute rules, and relationships, that it all works together. But now I'm going to turn this over to my boss, Tony Franks, and he's going to go over some of like, okay, we have all of this set up. Now, what does that look like for us?
Hey, you're muted, Tony, if you're talking.
Thanks, Josh. As I was saying, one of the things that we started introducing in some of our design work, especially once we go to the low level design, where we get ready to start creating, construction and permittable prints, utilizing CAD. Um, by introducing this LiDAR data, it significantly decreased our time to fielding these routes. Right, with this LiDAR, we get the point cloud data, and then we get the extraction of the analyst piece of the data, which gives us things like edge of pavement, the center line, or the road striping, any above ground structure within the light path of the LiDAR that it can pick up. And it's really increased our productivity and our decision making by introducing this LiDAR data. And another thing that you see here on this screen is not only was we able to get the point cloud data and the extraction piece of it, but was able to capture and utilize the geo-reference TIFFs that we created a mosaic or a tile service out of that got us down to a 1 foot accuracy on imagery from a top-down view, which also assists the engineers and other personnel to make key decisions on the way we want to design and build a particular network. It gives us real-time current field conditions at the time we drove it out. Like I said, it helps us with our fielding. It augments our fielding, right? The improved accuracy that we get from these drawings, has reduced our time significantly. Everything's geospatially correct. If I measure from one edge of the pavement to the other, or from one stripe to the other, I know what that. I can trust that is actually done and captured in the field. And then we also use this for long-term asset management. Like a lot of times in our industry, especially if you're in the utility world, you go out and build something, and then a property owner may come out and say that you tore up their property. By having this imagery, at the time before we done construction, we can always go back in time and look at this imagery and say, well, that driveway was already busted up, before we ever started construction. So it also helps with claims. So it can play a couple of different vital roles from engineering, decision making, and all the way through construction and as built and turn up for these customers. If some of you guys aren't using LiDAR, we typically use mobile LiDAR. We do augment it sometimes with a drone if we need to, and a backpack solution too to get behind the rear lot lines of subdivisions and things of that nature. Another thing that we typically don't use it for, we use other systems for it, but you can also get all of your pole attachment heights, your mid-span sags. You get a host of data just from driving this with mobile LiDAR. If there's a business case that you could think of, LiDAR probably could help you solve it, right? In many cases. As a single source of truth is a SDE connection. And if ARC is correct, if our database is true, then our CAD prints. We've taken this plugin to a different level too, right? By doing some automation inside of CAD with autolist scripts and to generate labels and bombs off of this right in the CAD. And then we compare that against our database. So, we run QA/QC reports that we've developed for the database, and then we run these automated list scripts, and as long and it matches right, our quantities and material matches from the database to these CAD prints, and it significantly changes the way we QA/QC this because everything we do is in ARC first. and CAD is just our output. This is what we're going to deliver to the customer and to the permit agencies. And what you see here, representation of this picture, we had to shrink it down, otherwise you would be able to see the label, more of the labels. This all came directly from LiDAR in our database. So we have the base map, which is the road and the bridge. As you can see, the bridge, you can see the creek, you can see the guardrails off the bridge, you can see the edge of pavements, the center line. All of that came from our database that we captured using LiDAR. So we did not have to redraw any of this, which saved us significant time in our drafting efforts. And then, like I said, we pull down our we hit CAD with this plugin. We can actually push and pull data between both systems, so we can make changes in CAD and push it back to ARC or vice versa. And then we pull down all the feature classes and all the associated attributes, and that's what we run our autolist scripts against to generate all of our labels that also turns into our bombs. We have a bomb for every page. We have the parent bomb that rolls up to that work order. It's really pretty cool how we do this. It's not overly complicated, but it does take a little bit of time and developing your schema correctly, and then your actual lines of blocks for your CAD. But once you get that set, you know, uh, sky's really the limit on how you want to interact with this data using this plugin. It's really cool. Uh, when we go to report off of it, we have dashboards off of the database, but then our old school construction folks or other folks, stakeholders that are more CAD driven, print driven, they really like to see this as well. So we're able to give people what they want, right? Different sets of people with what they want. Go ahead to the next one, actually. And then this is getting close to concluding this presentation. So we not only take this our database as a single source of truth and start our high level to low level design, interact with it with CAD, generate these construction and permit prints. But we'd also deploy field maps into the field with GNSS receivers to get our accuracy, usually sub-foot accuracy. And as the people in the field are collecting this data as it's being built, the same day it's being built, we're collecting rail line data, whether it's the depth of coverage point for a trench or a bore. So we record, where it was installed spatially, how deep it was. If we're moving handholds or something like that, we record the new locations with that, with that 1 foot accuracy. And then all this gets updated simultaneously with somebody in the office reviewing these red line points, lines, and polygons. We have them set as a default. They're open. There's a status, and the status is set to open. And that way, a technician in the office can just query these open red lines throughout the day, right? And we have an idea where the crews are working. We know what's going on with the schedule, so we create up these open red line points, lines, and polygons. And then that same day, we start moving our geometry to match how it was built in the field. And typically, we can turn around as built, depending on how large the work order is, within a few days, right? Instead of weeks or months, or sometimes people never turn them in, right? So this as built has proven to be probably one of the biggest achievements I think that we've done, right? Because I mean, it really brings engineering and construction together in one location, and everybody's being informed on it at the same time, in real time. And so that's been really probably one of the biggest things I think we've achieved, right? I know I went a little faster than I wanted to as well, but we do have time for some Q&A as well.
Yeah, thank you guys. That's awesome. That's really cool work you guys are doing. Nothing in the chat, but I have a couple questions, and anybody feel free to throw a question in chat or just unmute your mic and ask a question. But I've got a few. The first one is, who are your primary customers? Are you working for internet service providers? Are you guys primarily working for construction companies that are subcontracted? What's your main customer?
Yeah, so our main customers are startup ISP, right? People winning grant money, this BEAD money, and other type of state funded money or taxpayer money. So it's all tier twos, tier threes. We don't do any business with tier ones like the AT&Ts, Verizon's of the world. So it's all twos and three tiers. And we are engineering and construction. So we 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 engineer and construct jobs, and we will operate the network as well for a customer. So we got three operating contracts that we're doing. We're going to engineer it, build it, and operate the networks. So we're kind of in the game, from cradle to grave, if you will.
Where's most of your work located out of? I know Bonfire's
We
headquartered in Colorado, right?
We're headquartered in Denver. Unfortunately, we did a lot of work Denver and West. We got a couple of projects in California. We had one in Montana. We got a couple of projects going on in the Colorado area, southern Colorado and central Colorado. We got some stuff going on in Minnesota. We're about to have a large project in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Uh, big a big group of counties up in Pennsylvania.
Okay, you guys are pretty spread out.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, I know Ashley, you touched on ArcGIS Online, but you guys mentioned you build dashboards and things. So my assumptions either use an ArcGIS Online or the Enterprise Portal. Which one do you
Right.
guys leverage most? Both or?
Enterprise. Enterprise.
We we use the enterprise portal primarily, and that's so we can host our own data, right? And because otherwise, if you use online, it's going to be hosted on their service. So for security reasons and other reasons, we have gone with enterprise. Um, we do use online for their offline tile maps, so for mobile, but that is the only way we use online at the moment.
Which version of Enterprise are you guys using? Do you know?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
11.3.
11.3? Okay, cool.
We just tried to upgrade 11.4. Some things kind of crapped the bed, right? So we had to roll it back. But we're on 11.3 at the moment.
Yeah, I know 11.4. Any of the even numbers are typically temporary releases, so we always try and hard stick to the long term releases. So
Yeah, we
and
were trying. We were trying to go to 11.4 because we want to push out web editor, and that's one reason why we're going to 11.4.
and then you guys mentioned SDE and enterprise databases. What are you guys using? SQL, Postgres, Oracle?
Post
Yeah, Postgres.
Postgres.
Okay. And then you did mention the LiDAR collection. Is that something that you guys are doing within Bonfire, or you're contracting that out?
We contract that out. We've used various companies. A good one is Cyclomedia. They have some limitations, but they're pretty good. They got a great viewer. We use a company out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, as well, and we've qualified several others that we have just haven't used yet. But Cyclomedia and BBG are the main two that we've used.
Yeah, I guess with as spread out as your work is, you guys probably have to reach out to maybe who's closest or cheapest cost to travel.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last question I have. Anybody feel free to jump in after. What's the biggest challenge you guys face in kind of day to day operations? I know, Ashley, you touched on it quite a bit in the beginning, and with my brief foray in the telco, I know there's a lot of kind of the old guard who still likes to do CAD, and I know you guys are doing some cool stuff with the ArcGIS, AutoCAD integrations. But kind of what's the biggest challenge from both of you guys that you see kind of on day-to-day operations?
You want to go, Ashley? No, you ready to go?
No, I'm kind of curious what you say first. You go.
I think it's kind of like the challenges that I actually hit on at the beginning of the presentation. It's a lack of knowledge, the lack of understanding of what GIS data is, right? How you can utilize it. If you're getting people that's been in it for 20, 30 years that don't want to learn something new. They think it's too tedious. They think it's too much, too involved. You know, like Ashley said, they think there's too many attributes that need to be filled out. Uh, so it's really just the lack of understanding, and what we see a lot too is, you know, all the way up the chain. There's just a fundamental lack of understanding of what GIS data can do and what the purpose behind it is.
Yeah, so I would agree with Boss that it's definitely a challenge, right, for just implementing things. And getting others to use what you developed or created, right? I would also say another huge challenge, and I'm sure this is one that we all have, is just the data silos, just the sheer amount of data silos. Before implementing GIS, after implementing GIS, we can have department data silos, right? You don't think about, each department doesn't think about how they have to work together, right? Like construction and engineering, you hear that a lot where they're like, oh, I don't care about that. That's something construction will take care of. And it's like, well, construction kind of needs you to tell them, give them, a pointer, point them in the right direction, right? So, company data silos, systems data silos, people data silos, I mean, it's everywhere. And thankfully, implementing these, shared maps, getting rid of segmented work, getting people on the same page, it definitely helps. But like Tony was saying, there is still that challenge of explaining, why do we want it all in one system? And it's like, yes, your way is great, it's okay, but these are the pitfalls in the future, right? It works for you, but does it work for the company and for growing and scaling in the future? So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even from a county government perspective, I definitely can relate to the data silos. And I think a lot of what you guys are doing kind of echoes what we're trying to do with, publishing out more dashboards, experience builders, web apps, those kind of things to really show people the power of GIS and web GIS in particular. So I know, Tony, you talked about kind of those challenges in relating. You got any advice for folks on the call on how you can help bridge that gap?
No, I wish somebody had some advice for me. Um, we've done a lot of what we call T&Ds over here, training and development segments on Fridays, and we probably ran the board on that early part of this year. We had one every Friday. But you never know what people's engagement level is on these things because you don't get a lot of good feedback. If I guess the only advice I got is, when you talk about GIS to people that don't understand it, um, you just got to really dumb it down for them, right? And then you got to show them the proof, that it works, and that it will give them what they need. And even that's a challenge, For instance, we set up something for a project where they can, draw a polygon around a service terminal so they can get the house count and the house numbers and addresses and lat loans, right? And we made it, really simple for us to do, but it's like people don't even understand, that simple tool, it transformed that whole project on how they could report back to the customer, you know. But it don't get championed enough, that's something that easy if the data's correct in the database that you can report on it, with a few clicks of a button. So I'd dumb it down if I could.
I'd also recommend a lot of demos, right? I mean, there is a reason that the implementation, the partial implementation of GIS systems is a problem, and that's because people really like demos. Well, yeah, not that demos are bad, right? But people get really excited when you're like, oh, look what you can do, look at the outcome, and stuff. And we need to remember internally that we also need to be champions of GIS systems and products, and kind of like those T&Ds that Boss was talking about really helps. But I mean, we need to be very proactive about it, which it's hard to do because you're excited about the product, but you really got to understand how is your end client, for lack of better terms, really going to use it, and how can you demo it in a way that's exciting for them and keeps their attention, right? Because all I got to do is talk about relationships and and I'm like, whoa, yeah, let's get that GIS system going, right? But they need a little bit more, right? And they need a little bit more something shiny, right? So kind of come at it from that angle helps as well, right?
Well, I'll say this too, Josh, that one of our old bosses, who I was having lunch with the other day, Jerry Golden, and he said, Tony, the things that we take for granted, we take a lot of things for granted. Other people just don't understand, right? So I think you gotta put yourself in their shoes, right? They're novice, they're coming into something new, they're gonna be resistant right off the bat, right? So is it, have patience, dumb them down and walk it through, what they need to do and show them how it's going to, improve their life, right? It's not going to make it worse.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one piece of advice I'd have is just the value proposition, right? So that dollars and cents, that's really at the end of the day what a lot of this comes down to, at least from a leadership perspective. So you have to show how you can save money, and if that's time, and like in your case of creating as builds or drafting or field collection, saving resources, doing more with less, those kind of things. That's really what kind of talks at the end of the day. So awesome. Does anybody else have any questions? I didn't see anything in chat. Does anybody want to ask anything before we adjourn this?
I saw some people on this call that I recognize. I'm surprised they don't have any questions.
I guess we're just that good.
There's one of them.
All right, good deal. Well, Tony and Ashley, really want to thank you guys again. We really appreciate Bonfire being a corporate sponsor for GISAA. Shameless plug here for GISAA. If you're not a member or a past member that's lapsed, we'd really appreciate any kind of support, sponsorship. We're really funded and ran and out to serve our members and serve the greater GIS community for the state of Alabama. So we are a nonprofit. All the board members just give their time and energy to help promote GIS and this organization across the state. We've had a really good couple years here. We're continuing to grow, continue to do more of these lunch and learns, and that's really by all the members who are on here today and by great corporate sponsors like Bonfire. So we really appreciate everybody's time. If you haven't, there's an ArcGIS survey that's pinned up at the top. If you wouldn't mind just clicking on that, we're not going to spam you or collect any information aside from just wanting to know where you're calling in. We're building some cool dashboards and heat maps that really trying to identify where folks are calling in from. If you missed it earlier, we're trending in Mexico City. So anybody from Mexico City, please click the link. Curious how we're so popular there. Yep, there we go. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for attending. And with that, we'll end the call.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.